I'm about to just yell this intro. All right, welcome into the bench, episode 1. I am your host, Tettles, joined by host Squishei. What's up, man? How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Excited to be here after that exciting teaser on Twitter.
No porn acting involved in a podcast, thank God. And Growl, welcome, Growl.
Yeah, our acting wasn't the best. That was the first thing we said when we saw the video. We're like, yeah, we're not actors. Yo, what's going on?
All right, so basically what this podcast is, what we're trying to do is we just kind of wanted to get together as a group of 3 guys and kind of talk about just the state of World of Warcraft every single week. I think that we all kind of talked about it. There's not too much going on with this. There's not going to be any like Patreon incentives. Obviously, this podcast is going to be sponsored by Wowhead, as you see in the bottom right. But there's no like major sponsor read and stuff like that. I mean, I think we're just kind of talking a little bit candid. We just kind of wanted to talk about WoW each and every week and get together, right?
Y'all just turn on the cams, just like that we do. Just chat a little bit, get the content juices flowing, get ready for the new expansion. Everybody's hyped up, everybody's ready, everyone wants to talk about delves, and we are here for it.
Yes, delves. Oh my god, yes.
Yeah. Growl, your opinion on delves?
You know what? I really love them. I think I'm really excited. I've done some on beta, but no, I don't understand what they're doing with delves, but I think we're too early in that. Let's wait before everybody hates me.
I haven't done delves at all, actually.
I did a couple. I did some for some footage just to see. I mean, I knew what they were going to be, but it's just basically like a very short quest chain where you just do it underground. Like, I don't know. I was hoping for some more unique objectives, like things that are like, oh, this is really cool that I'm doing with my character. Like, oh, here's a dig site. Like, we have to defend it for 10 minutes and it like gets bigger and bigger waves, or like just something that's cool, but it's just like, pick up 12 candles, like collect 10 penguins, like feed 4 Niffin moles or whatever. And it's like, man, this is just a quest that's in a cave.
All right, so yeah, the general vibe of the podcast, we're just going to be complaining about delves once a week for the entire hour to hour and a half.
Actually, that was the first episode. See you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, goodbye. So basically the podcast is going to be available on YouTube and podcast platforms near you. After this, I have to figure out I got to research how to do RSS feed uploading, but surely that won't be that hard. If that guy Frank can do it, I'm sure that I can figure it out myself. On top of that, we're looking to field Q&A every week, which we might or might not have this week. Tweet at thebenchwow on x.com, formerly known as Twitter, or you can actually send us DMs as well. So if you're looking to get Q&A answered, please tweet at us or just DM it to that Twitter, and that'll work. Any final housekeeping rules?
Your question is going to get lost if you DM me. Definitely tweet it.
tweet it or DM it to this Twitter. Yes, please.
Or DM it to Tettles. Or I guess I'm the only irresponsible one on the podcast. Just don't DM me.
But you dressed up so formally for this podcast episode.
Yeah, of course. I always got to have my drip on.
Okay, cool. All right, so the topics that we got lined up today are Affix Rework and War Within. I think that was something that I wanted to talk about mostly because that happened about a month ago at this point. We've actually been seeing a lot of stuff going on with just what is going on with the affixes in War Within. I think that it's kind of a good jumping off point. We also have the schedule on launch. That was kind of controversial this week. And then we've got myth track changing and just random miscellaneous other news. All right. Squishei, how have you been feeling about the Affix rework? What's your gut reaction with it so far?
Gut reaction? It's about damn time that they did something about these affixes. It started off really well, I think. And I think over time it started to become a little more sus. But I think with the last rework to the Voidbound Emissary, I do think it's gotten a lot better. And I think a lot of people will have a much better experience with these affixes.
Real quick, should I go over the changes maybe? Just a little brief history.
Yeah, maybe we should just like start at the top. So initially they were doing what? They were trying to add Kiss Curse affixes, right?
Well, so in previous expansions for most of Mythic Plus, there was fortified or tyrannical. Basically, yes. You buff mobs or you buff bosses on every keystone or most of them. And then as you moved up in key level, you get these sort of like extra challenges. When mobs die, they buff everything, or when mobs die, they hurt you, or just little things like that. And then at the sort of like the soft cap of the keystones where the rewards end, there's like a final seasonal affix usually that seasonal affix is related to what's going on in the game, like the raid or whatever. That sort of went away in Dragonflight, and it's just went to the fortified and tyrannical and the negative affixes. However, people don't like negative. People don't like doing dungeons, farming for gear, and then it turned into, not what fun stuff is there going on this week, but what miserable stuff do I have to deal with? So Blizzard kind of, surprisingly, because they didn't announce any of this in between the expansions until they just did it, they basically just took a hacksaw to the entire system. Now the way it works, it's a little more confusing, I would say, but now there's the same fortified tyrannical for lower level dungeons. Then you get what they call Xal'atath's bargain, which is sort of like a challenge. However, every challenge now rewards you if you do the affix properly with some sort of buff, and we'll go over the buffs later on. On top of that, then after that, they start adding in the negative affixes. And then on top of that, once you reach the sort of like penultimate or soft cap or whatever, like in 10 or 12 or whatever they end up deciding, the affix actually goes away. So now it's tyrannical and fortified, which both bosses and mobs are buffed. And there's no bargain like kiss, curse, good thing, bad thing going on. It's literally just the dungeon is the dungeon. And there's a little, other small things going on with increasing the penalty for deaths and all that, but we'll go into that soon.
Yeah, so I think that you outlined it really well. And so whenever you're playing these, basically, I think that the bargains are probably the most interesting affix. Blizzard did try to come up with some, I would say, kind of interesting kiss curse affixes that worked with the pre-existing system, where it was reckless, focused, attuned, and thorned, and players hated those. They thought they were very bad. And so yeah, like Growl said, they went with the bargain instead. And so, Growl, what have you been thinking about the bargains? Because they've been changing them up a lot lately.
Yeah, so it seems like they're... I like it that they're constantly going back to the drawing board and changing stuff. It seems clear that they're not even quite sure what they're going to do, which is a little bit concerning, but it's also good that they're willing to switch stuff up and kind of be like, okay, we really want to make sure this M Plus is good. Even though the expansion is only coming out in a month, like we're going to constantly keep iterating on these. So in general, I would say my first impressions are, number one, if you're someone who's very serious into dungeons and you're doing them at a high level, these things turn off at a certain point.
Yeah.
So you don't worry about them. So if there are these really sorts of like kind of gotcha moments in dungeons where it seems unfair, it's not going to happen in like very, very competitive and serious moments. It's mainly just while you're gearing up and while you're progressing up the ladder, which is, I would say, a good thing. I would say in general, they're pretty easy, except for sort of like what I mentioned, those like gotcha moments of, like for instance, one of the affixes is it creates an ad, and the ad will slowly the void emissary one.
Yeah.
So it'll like slowly build up and like buff the mobs around it. But when you kill it, then you steal the buff and then you get this buff, right? The problem is, let's say you're on a boss where, oh no, the boss activates the super mega danger shield and you have to kill the shield. Oh, but now there's an ad, and it's like, well, it kind of like it's difficult, especially during boss encounters where you have things that you need to be doing, and then on top of it, these affix just sort of appears, and it kind of feels like it pulls you in two different directions. So I feel like, in general, on Trash, it's really fun. I love the buffs that it gives. It feels impactful. On bosses, it can be cool, but it also creates some dangerous overlaps that I'm not really sure how they're going to fix.
I will say it does feel very seasonal affix level. So if you played any of the seasonal affixes in the past, it feels very expansion level with like a seasonal where these are polarizing things. Right now we only have 3 of them, so it's kind of unclear as to how they're supposed to be changing.
Yeah, there's a datamine placeholder 4th one, which
really
is it's just listed as placeholder right now. But I assume they're going back up to 4. They put 4 in originally. There looks to be maybe 4 now, and they have a pretty decent spread almost, dude, I feel like. But
they're so close to the expansion launch. Hold on. We haven't tested it.
Placeholder.
I know. But, I mean, there's a full month almost between launch and Mythic Plus, so they do have some time still. But it looks like they want to almost go up to 4 again, which would lead maybe to a nice 4-week rotation. That seems like a decent amount of change from week to week.
as somebody who's played a lot of beta and plus dungeons, I actually think that these changes are pretty positive, just as a whole. I think that I do have some concerns, especially as like a high-end key player. I worry that the system might end up feeling stale pretty far into the system, because like Growl was describing, all of the affixes basically go away at the plus 12 level. But I do think it's like posturing and setting them up for a better affix system in the future. And I think also with like dungeons changing every single season, it's probably fine. Obviously, I don't think it's like a perfect system, and I think that it's something that they're going to keep reiterating on. But I think that Blizzard's kind of proven that they're willing to reiterate relatively frequently, because the last time we got an Affix rework was in the middle of Dragonflight even. So I think that it's one of those things that even if it doesn't launch perfect, I think it can be okay.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
That wasn't even an Affix rework, I feel like. That was just them doing more tuning almost.
Removing explosive, quaking, and Grievous wasn't an Affix rework? I don't know.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Growl?
It's kind of weird because, like, back in the day when we all first started playing World of Warcraft, you have your one game, and you play your one game and you play it. 5 months, you're still playing it. A year long, you're still playing it. Nowadays, games, I feel like, are so much more different in that I sort of blame / attribute PoE to this, where games just feel so seasonal now, where every single thing that goes on is like a flash in the pan of like, a new expansion comes out. Oh, everybody's playing it. Everyone's streaming it. Everyone's hype. A month later, no one cares. Like, everyone's kind of done. Everyone did their thing. People devour content so much faster than developers can make content nowadays, except for like the very, very try-hard, like, lifetime players or whatever. And I feel like this is sort of what, like, Mythic Plus coming into that era, which I don't know for better or for worse. But I think people will play Mythic Plus less. Like, I think there's going to be less people who are like really deep into the season that are really like caring about pushing. But I do think that of the time that you play M Plus for the first month or two, you're going to have a better time. Like, how many times have you had it where a season starts, you're excited, you get your friends to play, and then the very first week is tyrannical, sanguine, double bolstering, bursting, and your healer is just like a resto shaman that normally plays enhancement, and you're just dead every pull. And you're like, why is this the first week of the season, right? Like, it's almost like the first 2 weeks of the season, the affixes are more important than the next 10 weeks combined. Because eventually you get your gear and you don't care, and like if you're a Mythic Plus nerd, you play anyway. So I feel like while I'm worried that they might look at participation numbers and see, or like, look at the group finder and see, oh, Mythic Plus dies off or tapers off. But I really feel like the first month or two is going to be like, dang, like it's going to feel so fresh going into the War Within and being like playing with all these new affixes, not worrying about sanguine, not worrying about bolstering, and then having that Fort Tyran, not necessarily like needing to wait a week to see what Tyran's going to be and all that. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's different. I wouldn't say it's like significantly better or worse. It's just different.
Yeah. These affixes don't seem very like overpowering either as well. And obviously when you want to do them, because when you do them, your entire party gets a buff. And it's not like, you soak this orb and only you do. It's not, you're not competing against your team. It is a team effort to complete these affixes, which I think is also kind of an awesome thing.
I will say the only affix that is like that is what Growl was outlining earlier with Voidbound, where there are specific moments where Voidbound can spawn. Like, you get this emissary that buffs the mob's damage, and it's like the moment that the Arakara first boss AoE goes off, and you're like, I guess I'm wiping. Like, what am I supposed to do about that?
Yeah, I think one thing that people will notice, if you haven't been playing beta, it might not make a lot of sense, but I feel like a lot of these bosses in the new dungeon especially are very like, they're intense. There's like a sequence going on. Like, if you like some of the bosses, for instance, I don't know any of the names, but for instance, the first boss in Arakara, right? It's basically this giant crab. It does a ton of AoE damage constantly. And it's spawning these spiders everywhere around the room. And if the boss ever eats these spiders, it gets buffed or whatever. And it basically just kills you. Like, you can never let any of the ads get to the boss. But because every single dungeon now is tyrannical in a high key, it's like a 4-minute fight. Like, you're dragging it around. You're like pathing out around the entire like first part of the dungeon. It is just like an intense boss. And so like to add in these affixes during boss combat, I don't want to say it preemptively because I do like some of the interactions, but I kind of feel like they might need to disable the affixes during boss combat, because like some of them are like the area denial of some of these bosses where it like corners you into a corner of the room, and then just now there's this now there's orbs surrounding the boss in a circle and you have to intercept them. It's like, well, this just doesn't work on some of these boss fights.
I do think I think that they're getting into a good spot. I don't want to be like super early on, because this is a beta, and you do hear some people be like, "Oh, you can't complain about anything; it's still in the beta." And I think that's not very true. I think that you should criticize whenever you see it, but I think that they're continuing to improve this to the point where I hope that it's good on launch, and I suspect that it probably will be. Now, if what Squishei said is true, and they actually have a fourth affix that's untested, maybe I'm a little bit more concerned.
I mean, it could replace one of the current three, if any of them are particularly bad. But I feel like they're pretty committed to all of those at this point. They just tuned what I would consider the worst one, Voidbound, into a semi-reasonable state.
Yeah,
minus the damage amp. So I don't exactly know what this fourth one could be, but I mean, people talk very very positively about Encrypted, and as of recently, they just added the cooldown reduction to the Voidbound one. We've seen, I think it's haste on another one. We have crit, we have mastery now as well. It's like we're getting all the stats that, I don't know, maybe we get verse on the last one.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, there's 4 affixes. 3 of them give you 3 of the stats. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Like, it kind of feels like the last one is just verse, but maybe I'm wrong. I just sense a pattern coming.
Speed.
Dude, should CDR replace versatility as a stat? I've seen a lot of people just being very anti-versatility lately, and I'm definitely one of them. I think it's a really stupid stat. Could cooldown reduction ever actually replace versatility?
Way too complicated. I feel like CDR messes with the way classes function. I don't know if that's a troll question, but I mean, I think CDR being unless it's very, very, very small, just the way things interact. Like, for example, let's say you're in a cooldown for 10 seconds. And then there's a really powerful button you can press, but you can only press it once. But if you have enough CDR, you can all of a sudden press it twice in that cooldown window. I feel like there's just way too many weird interactions with rotations and classes to make CDR. I don't know. Personally, I kind of like verse simply because when it comes to throughput, versus the stat that generally is the worst for most classes. Yeah. And the only classes that are good for verse, they're only good for verse because they suck with the other stats, right? And it's kind of like throwing classes a bone. Okay, well, if you don't scale that well with stats, at least you get a little bit tankier because you're stacking verse.
I mean, the biggest issue with versatility is it takes 10% more versatility stat to get 1% versatility than it does 1% of any other stat too. So it's I mean, it's just one of the stats that you get significant diminishing returns. So if your class scales the best with versatility, then they just suck, right? They suck at scaling.
Right, but but in general, it's the other way around. Your class is scaling the best at versatility because your class sucks at scaling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not because, oh man, I'm eating this verse up. This verse is boosting so many of my things. It's just because it doesn't scale with crit or mastery or whatever.
The only reason I asked what I did about CDR is because I'm thinking about Ineffable Truth, and I've played with this Voidbound emissary, and the CDR is noticeably pretty cool.
It's fun.
I mean, my personal opinion, this is a longer discussion, but I would love to see secondary stats just change in general. Haste becomes basically the main stat plus utility. Haste becomes haste plus movement speed. Verse is damage reduction and flat damage. Crit is leech or something, or cooldown reduction plus crit. Just basically a utility plus a main, but that's a longer discussion. But
that would be kind of.
I think secondary stats are very boring right now. So I would love to see them mixed up, but
I agree.
Longer discussion.
I don't know, Growl. I mean, you started playing the game in BFA. What do you think about secondary stats? Have they ever been interesting to you?
Yeah, I hard agree that they're really boring. I think. So previously, when I went into WoW, I had more outlandish views on stats. One of the more interesting things about games, I feel is the way that you want to build your character. Right. This is again going in a way another just but hey, this is a podcast, we get to do this.
This is our
So,
podcast, I think.
I think one of the most interesting things in games is when you decide how much damage do I deal versus how tanky do I want to be. You know, when you think about, oh, how do I build an Elden Ring, for example, right? Like you see these people like who are fat rolling with tons of armor or whatever, and they're like, they can take 7 hits, but also they're really slow and they don't do as much damage. Or you see these people with these huge damage builds and they're running around naked, you know? And it's like, to me, that's interesting. It's a weird situation in WoW, but I do wish there was more leeway. Like, you know, what if I could make a build that did more damage but had less stamina? Like, what if you had way more control over that to the point where like
stamina, holy shit.
Well, yeah,
That
exactly,
existed.
right? Well, right. So I think that would be a lot more interesting because number one shots would like never be a thing, right? Because you could literally just keep gearing more and more and more stamina. You would never have to worry about getting one shot if you're able to do that. And then ultimately, like it's number one, it's up to you to determine like how tanky and safe you want to be versus, because I mean you do 0 damage when you're dead. Like there's no argument that being an ultra glass cannon is the best way to play. You know, that would never work in high keys, it would never work in low keys. But and I also think it sort of gets rid of the, I don't know how you would say, like sim culture or like best in slot everything, right? Because like it's up to you how you want to play, right? Like the sim is just going to tell you to run around naked and do infinite damage, but like if you're just going to die to every, you know what I mean? Like you have to physically think. I think it might be a little bit too much for WoW because it would totally screw with the encounter design, but I've always thought that if you could somehow move around your health and damage and be able to change those, I feel like that would be really cool.
So we kind of had that with corruption, right? Where
Exactly. Well, corruption, the problem with corruption is they were so scared to deal with your health that they didn't want to mess with your max health or like armor or whatever. And so all of the downsides were so annoying, right?
They were really
like,
annoying.
Right. Like imagine if corruption was just every point of corruption, you lost 1% max health. And so like if you wanted to play on 50% corruption, that's fine. And like that also creates some interesting builds of like, well, what if you're 50% corruption, but that's all verse corruption? And it's like your max health is half, but you're taking 40, you know what I mean? Like I just feel like it's a really cool design space in terms of the people that like builds. I just don't think that WoW is really that type of game now that I've played WoW for enough years. Like I think it just doesn't fit in with the way people interact with mythic raids and mythic dungeons and stuff to be able to just double your max health with, you know what I mean, click an armor set and be like, oh, I have another, you know, 2 million health now, let me see how I do this dungeon.
Okay.
It's also
it's
also not how encounter designers have been designing bosses. They are tuning them for the tip top optimization of all the classes at this point that everybody has to deal with. So everybody, of course, prioritizes optimization and not damage reduction. You have to figure out how to survive with your glass cannon build because that's the way it was designed.
Yeah. All right. So circling back to the affix discussion a little bit more.
This will happen a lot, by the way, for you guys who are just tuning in. We're tangent mains.
Let's talk about Challenger's Peril. So Challenger's Peril is one of the new affixes. It says dying subtracts 15 seconds from time remaining rather than 5 seconds. And I've had this question a couple of times in my chat, and it's particularly from healer players. And then people make a statement that's like, this will negatively affect healers more than other roles and make people more toxic to healers due to deaths contributing more of a time loss. Do you think this has merit, Growl? Like, I feel like I feel like you're like depleting the key anyways. I feel like there's no way that people are going to become more toxic towards healers because of this, right?
First of all, is this a toxic question? Is this assuming that healers die more often than everyone else?
No, I think
what this is.
I think it's
what do you
healers,
mean?
I think it's healers control like group deaths more.
Okay, so healers don't die more. It's just their fault that other people die, or what are we getting?
I think so. Yes, that is the point.
I mean, I
they
don't
at least
really
have control, right? Not that it's necessarily their fault, but they're in control sometimes.
Well, in terms of toxicity, I think the big one is going to be in pugs very often. This is something that I don't see personally, but I hear complained about a lot from people is levers, right? You go into a pug, you wipe to the first boss. Well, I mean, this is an easy dungeon. We could easily still time this anyway, but you know, whatever, Timmy the mage is mad and he's just going to leave and do something else, right? Because it's not his key anyway. And I feel like having a lot of deaths or having deaths be even more punishing is going to make levers even worse, right? Because now the reason to leave is actually even bigger. You're like, not only did we just wipe there, but we just lost an extra minute off of our clock. So while toxicity, I don't think it's role specific. I do think it'll definitely increase like people just being like, screw this. Like I'm just leaving this key. Like wipes are going to be so punishing.
I do wonder if they should just like completely remove the deplete system below a 10.
That was essentially what I was going to say. I think the Zelda is that bad because of how punishing the deplete system is. You lose Cress, you lose your key, and you lose your score. Like, it is overly punishing to deplete a key at this point. And I think that's kind of where that's coming from. And if they alleviate some of those factors, I don't think it would be that bad unless you were specifically trying to push your key, because that's the only time at which point then it matters. It's a weird affix though. Because I feel like Diag is pretty punishing with their lack of checkpoints at times. You're already running back, but yeah.
No, I have huge copium here. Okay, my huge copium here is that the reason that they're doing this is because they want to make great checkpoints in every dungeon in the War Within. So now they're like, well, we can't make things like that easy, right? The checkpoints are going to be so good in the War Within that they're like, well, we have to punish them a little more for deaths now because every single dungeon is going to have a checkpoint for each boss, right, guys? Sorry, overdose a little bit there. My bad.
Yeah, you want a hit of this, man? Like,
yeah, no, I got plenty. Oh, I'm on it right now.
Oh, okay, work. There's no fucking way they're like, oh yeah, you know what we're gonna do? Make great checkpoints. Have you been inside of like City of Threads and stuff where City of Threads and Arakara both, instead of having like a normal checkpoint, you have to click on a bug and it like flies you through the zone. And you're like, dude, please just spawn me at the last boss.
The new Miss one is only available by certain classes and races.
I think that'll get fixed. My cope is that gets fixed.
All right, Squishy, who's coping more?
my cope is that gets fixed. Okay, so for those who don't know, Mists got changed to where the walls and the checkpoints are openable by Druid, High Mountain Tauren, Night Elf, and Herbalists. I somehow suspect that this will get changed to just be everybody, because the checkpoint, man, like what you just don't have a checkpoint? Like, what is that?
Tettles, let's get off the copium here. What's going to happen is you're going to have this start of Halls of Infusion when you just have to run back from the start of the dungeon, and if you didn't clear the trash, you're just walking the entire way back, and it takes 3 minutes.
You get time to reflect, everyone gets to talk about what went wrong and how to do things better and just really bond. And, that's the thing that I want to do most in my Pug +7s when I'm wiping to a boss 3 minutes away from the graveyard, is I just want to bond with them a little bit more and spend that time walking back, reflecting.
15 seconds on the timer doesn't matter if I'm spending a minute and a half to get back to the pack.
Oh, but I mean, realistically, there's definitely a problem with the timer design in dungeons right now in Dragonflight. And we've seen it, right? We've seen how many of these runs you see that has 27 deaths, and then it's just like an in-time +17 or whatever.
That's unacceptable.
And
I agree.
And I feel like it's hard. So the problem that they're trying to solve, if people are like kind of wondering what the hell they're thinking, is when you're doing a low Mythic Plus dungeon, you're sort of just kind of like, holding W, going pack by pack. As you get better and better, while you do more and more damage, you also get smarter with what you can pull, right? You get way more coordinated with, we can pull these 3 packs, we can pull this pack with the boss. And it sort of becomes a little bit weird to balance the timer, to make a fair timer for somebody who not only is under-geared, but also, well, for lack of a better word, sucks, and doing, a civilian. No, those are 2 different things. And somebody who's going really, really fast and trying to do like a 12 or a 13 or whatever. And it's like that sort of, it's a very strange like line in the sand of like, okay, at this level, deaths are way, way more punishing. But they do sort of have this problem of people are so good at M+ now and so smart at the way they pull and efficient that like, it's coming to a point where it's like, if you can kill every boss, you can just time the key no matter what. Even if you have like, suboptimal classes, people are running 4 tank trinkets in TGP keys. Like people are, and just like full wiping and being able to time these keys. Like there is a problem. I don't think the death timer is a great solution, especially for bugs, but I see the problem that they're trying to get at.
I do think that they philosophically are trying to address this in a couple of different ways too, where it's like, I think it's pretty clear that at least the Mythic Plus devs believe that there are too many defensives in the game. And so what's the only way that you can kill players? oh, we're just going to one-shot them. And then in addition to that, it's like, it's pretty clear that at least the M Plus devs believe that you have too much AoE CC. And again, there's the question of what are you supposed to do to stop that? And they've made a pretty significant change in the dungeons. And like, once you start playing more within dungeons, you'll notice it immediately. All mobs recast after they're hit with an AoE CC. Pretty much every single ability. I can't think of a single ability that doesn't recast whenever it's hit with an AoE CC. And I think that it's just a byproduct of kind of like what Growl was saying, where it's like they're trying to walk this thin line of like the classes have been designed a certain way. So then they're going to try to make the content challenging. Now, I don't know if, you know, the death timer is the appropriate solution, or making the mobs basically CC immune, for lack of a better term, is the greatest solution. But I think I understand where they're coming from with it, at least.
I still think the issue with death timer is still just it's too punishing if you fail the key, and I think that's where the majority of things come from. If you got full crests and your key didn't deplete, you probably wouldn't feel that bad, but you do when you don't hit that timer.
People have different goals in dungeons too. Some are there to get gear, some are there to get crests, and some are there to get score.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to say. And I feel like here's the thing, right? Mythic Plus, I feel like is awesome in the sense that it creates this environment to completely test your character, to play with your friends, to get really good at the game, tons of replayability. The problem is there's this really good farmable loot that's gated behind Mythic Plus, right? You can get Myth Track Veer from your vault. You can get these really good trinkets. So what happens is you have these people, a huge chunk of people who don't necessarily care about pushing their character to the limits and doing the timer and all this. Like, they're just trying to do a dungeon with their friends, and they're in this key, and it's like, why do we even have a timer? Like, why are we rushed? Why are there these affixes, right? Like, I'm just trying to do some cool bosses with my friends and farm up loot. And I feel like a lot of the problem, especially with key depleting, comes from, like, you know, people that don't even care about the timer and the pushing keys in the first place get punished very, very, very heavily by all this stuff when I don't think they necessarily should. And I do feel like I like what Blizzard is doing in the sense of, like, okay, let's have these affixes up till 10. Let's change things for hierarchies. And I do think they need to continue on that, possibly with, let's not make keys deplete until you get to 10s or whatever. Because I do think they need to create, like, if they want to encourage, like, in general, right? If you put the best loot behind something, right, you're basically funneling people to do that, right? Whether you put the best loot behind PvP or Mythic Raid or Mythic Plus, you're basically encouraging people to do that. So if they're going to encourage people to do this Mythic Plus, I think they need to be willing to bend the rules a little bit and accommodate those people who aren't necessarily like hardcore M Plus players more. I don't think this thing really matters as much for, like, higher keys. Like, I think keys depleting is, like, actually a big part of pushing high keys. But, like, if you're trying to just get some gear and you're pugging a +7 and then some idiot leaves your key or just pulls the whole dungeon or whatever, like, do you really deserve to have your key depleted or whatever? Like, I don't think so.
No. I don't think you should. I agree.
I mean, it's also just like you have a 10 key week 1 or, you know, 20 previously. You want to help some friends with it, but they may not be the best at Mythic Plus, and you're just trying to get their weekly vault. You know that key is going to turn to a 9 after. You're going to get them to the completion, but now you have to build your key back up from a 9, and it's just kind of like, you may not feel the best about it.
Dude, I had so many of those runs at the beginning of Dragonflight with my guildies where it's like, to do a 19 or whatever, you had to, like, have some people who were, like, really sweaty on the beta, and then to time a 20, you're not timing a 20 without people who are, like, super sweating the beta, but then they deplete your key and then you're back out there trying to get the 19 pushed back up again to the 20, and you're like, oh my god.
Wow, what a great segment into my new section of the podcast that I just invented called Story Time with Growl. So in this story time, we're going to talk about a question that I get asked a lot. My first time meeting Dorki. Great question, right? So in the very first week of Mythic Plus and BFA, my first week of playing the game, I was in Mythic Plus. I really wanted to get a timed 10 because that's going to be the best loot in my vault. And everyone says you have to do that. But man, I couldn't do it. I got to 8, maybe 9, but I could not time a 9. It was tough. It was Monday. I was going to give up. One of my friends who I was playing with, I have this great tank. He's an MDI player. I didn't even know what MDI was. He'll come help us. So a guy joins our group. His name is Dorki. He's a blood DK. He's like, don't worry, I have a key. It's a 10 Atal Dazar. So we start to, it's a little rocky, you know, we have some wipes. We get to the pack before Priestess Alunza. Now that's a pretty scary pack. We wipe to it. We res, we pull it again. We wipe to it again. We pull it again and we instantly wipe to it again. And Dorki's like, you guys aren't doing this. And then he just leaves the key. And so then we don't end up having a 10 timed. We don't time that 10, but that was the first time I got to play with Dorki.
Was he justified in leaving?
Probably. I mean, I was healing on a Resto Shaman on week 1 of BFA as someone who's never played the game before. So
I think you started out as a Mistweaver monk. That's where I met you, as a Mistweaver.
Nope. My first character was Pet Zergling the Resto Shaman because I saw Sea-Doo and I wanted to be a PvP Resto Shaman player, and so I made a Resto Shaman.
Let's talk about the dungeons. How the dungeons felt overall. What do you think, Squishei?
Well, first thing, the checkpoint system's interesting. You know, the clip that you're showing during Growl's story time there, Growl died and ran back for most of that story. So that tells you about how long that lasted. But there are some really hard bosses right now. The one that's actually on screen, the Duo Scrap Masters.
Yeah.
This boss, once you figure out the mechanics, it's still hard. Until you figure out the mechanics, it's very hard. I mean, as Growl, I think the healing on this boss is pretty crazy as well, right? There's just a lot of it.
Yeah, this is a great example of a boss that this is a cinema of a boss for sure. This is like, you know how you walk up to a boss and you're playing with someone who's never done it for the first time and you try and figure out how to explain it in one sentence? You get to this boss, you just type good luck in the chat and then you pull it. Like, you don't even bother trying to explain this boss.
I think that they actually did a lot. I think they made a lot of cool M+ bosses. I feel like in the past, I've normally like complained about M+ boss design being like really bad and having a bunch of these major flaws, especially whenever they like scale with Tyrant and stuff. I think they've made a lot of cool M+ bosses. Now, there are a couple of dungeons, and this is definitely one of them, where the bosses are literal raid bosses, where you're like, well, I'm fighting an actual raid, like there's like raid level mechanics on some of these bosses, and you're like, wow, this thing is so hard.
I mean, the big thing with this one is the overlaps, right? Like, there's so basically there's a boss that has a spell that you have to kick, right? Like every single time you have to kick it, or it basically
small
kills
person.
you. And it's constantly like, okay, you know, everyone has to hide in the vent, but you have to figure out a way to kick this, or oh, this boss jumps to the other side of the room, or oh, there's this big cube that blows up, as you see right there. Like, you know, there's so much stuff going, and it's every single mechanic intertwines with every single other mechanic, and it just, yeah, you see me just being very confused.
Yeah, I'm all for really cool like dungeon bosses because I think, you know, a tank and spank for 5 minutes is just not exciting. But I think some of the bosses are almost suffering from ability overload. Like, I honestly think that boss could just do without the kick. If the kick was just gone, I think it's a better boss for removing it.
Oh, then it's a movement fight as opposed to, dude, the kick is by far the hardest part, because for those who don't know, you have to either have probably an evoker or a mage, I think, are the only two classes that are realistically getting that kick every single time, because you have to like have a really far ranged kick and somebody who also has a dash or movement ability that can get the kick every single time.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things that I've noticed is that I don't believe that all of the dungeon mechanics are super intuitive in the way that they should be, in particular. And I'm thinking Dawnbreaker primarily, but it's a lot of the War Within dungeons where there are some mechanics where you're like, unless you have somebody who's hand-holding you and telling you exactly what to do, or you've done that dungeon a couple of times, you're probably going to die, or you're not going to know where to go, or you won't realistically know what to do. But I do think I think the bosses in general have improved a substantial amount. I can't think of one boss where I'm like, okay, actually the first boss of Arkar, but I can't think of any other bosses aside from that where I'm like, this is dreadful, this needs to be changed immediately. Where in the past, you know, you had y'all news of every single patch where there was like 3 of them, and you're like, this is garbage. Like, we're going to wipe to this every single time.
Yeah. I mean, Growl can probably speak on this more, but I think the thing that I've noticed is just, what was that boss in Not Good Offensive? It was the second boss with the big AoE, and
Raging
how
Tempest.
yeah, its AoE got nerfed, I think, like 3 times in season 1 or something like that. It feels like a lot of the bosses, at least 50% of them, just deal incredible amounts of AoE damage right now.
We're testing really low item level. We're testing at heroic item level, and we're trying to do max level keys. max level.
The AoE damage is definitely a thing. I think it's like a mix of both of what you guys are saying. Like number one, they have this sort of identity crisis, I think, with healers where they want Shadowlands. I think they went a little bit too far in that a lot of the bosses just didn't really do that much. Like at the end of the expansion, tanks were very strong. They didn't need healing, and also groups were very strong and they didn't need healing. And it was just sort of like a lot of healers got bored, but they definitely overcorrected, and they're overcorrecting even more with how much group damage they're doing. But it's also true that at talking about item level, the more your healer gets power, the more HP your group has, the less urgent it feels to top everybody. Like so many of these mechanics do 90% of your health, and so it's like you feel obligated to need to top everybody up. And again, when you're trying to do the world first keys, that's going to happen. But, we're mainly talking about, in like the 10 to 11 range. Once you get really, really chunky, gear and you got really big health, it's not going to feel as crazy to like live through these.
I will say the haves and the have-nots of healing feels like it is a noticeable difference. So you have Disc Priest versus the rest of the field, where I know that I'm zoning out before the first boss if I have a Disc Priest in my group, whereas, maybe we can make it through if I have any other healer. Oh,
yeah, that's definitely a thing on beta where it's like, number one, I feel like I'm sort of trolling by like doing weird healing builds, or like for instance, right now, Holy Priest tier set is bugged where they drain mana too much. And I just can't get through the bosses. Like it's just, I just run out of mana and we die. Like the bosses are that tough in the level of keys that we're doing. On top of that, it's like, I'll log into a healer and my team will be like, hey, buddy, like, can you play Resto Shaman for this one? Like, can you get off that whatever dog shit you're playing? Like, I don't know if I want, can you just get on a good healer for this key? Like,
that's an us. I will say that's a high end mentality, right? That's like a high end mentality where like even on the beta, you don't want somebody playing some dog shit. Like you're like, all right, can we at least test this with something that's like reasonably good?
Yeah, I guess that's true. We're just nerds.
But yeah, back to the original question. I think the season dungeons are like I almost Dragonflight. The War Within dungeons are way more complex. I think the bosses, a lot of them, you're not just gonna go in and be able to kind of not really know anything. I feel like a lot of them just have one major mechanic that you really need to know, or else it's going to screw you. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I feel like the majority of them do. Like Dawnbreaker, the first boss, you have to fly away, which just isn't intuitive. The last boss of Dawnbreaker, the wave, it feels like a lot of them just have that.
They utilize the movement a lot in a lot of these dungeon bosses, in my opinion, and I think they've utilized it well. Like I don't think it's like poor, but I think it's. I think that players at the very beginning, it feels very reminiscent of Dragonflight, where players are probably going to struggle to be able to kill some of these bosses, and I suspect that some of them will get nerfed.
Yes.
Dawnbreaker is a great example, actually. That Squishei brings up, like. Just imagine a group of 5 people who don't know what's going on zoning into a Dawnbreaker. Like, what would they even do? Like,
is there a Dawnbreaker in this VOD even? I wonder if I can find it.
Yeah, our group doesn't like to do Dawnbreaker. There's mainly Mists of Tyrannosaith in our testing. But like, I think it's actually kind of a good shout that like, how many, like now we know, right? And kind of that's just WoW. Like you just learn and then you pass it down and then other people learn. And there's probably more of those things than we'd like to admit that don't make any sense, but we just learn from other people. But yeah, Dawnbreaker is like, just imagine you kill the first boss and you're just like flying above this city. And it's like, what are we even like? You have to look at your map and like find the mini bosses and like know where to land. And yeah, I don't even like personally, now that I know the dungeon and they've done some tuning, I don't even think the dungeon's that crazy or that bad or that unfair.
I agree.
But man, people are going to be out of their zone when they're trying to learn this. If they're just like imagine just Natty just raw doing this without knowing what's going on the first week with just like 4 random people.
I've preached this for the longest time with Dawnbreaker. I feel like my biggest issue with Dawnbreaker is I don't know where to go. I know where to go in the sense of I've done the dungeon. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know where the mini bosses are. I know how to deactivate the boss. I know where I'm supposed to be landing. I know what the meta strat is, but I don't know what to do if I'm just like, if I take my knowledge, my pre-existing knowledge out of it, and then I'm just like looking at the map and stuff, I have no idea where I'm supposed to be dragon riding to. And I think the Dawnbreaker struggles with that 100%. Among a couple of bugs related to the Dawnbreaker itself flying.
Yeah, isn't there like a blink bug or something? Like you can't use things on the ship? Or
you can't rescue through the boat, otherwise you fly straight through the boat. Okay, first off, you drop your partner off in the belly of the boat, which they can't get out, and then you fall straight through and die. So like there's a lot of movement abilities that are like that. I want to say Vengeful Retreat's also like that, where you just like fly off. Like what?
But yeah, like I know Dawnbreaker also has the orb mechanic, which is just a one shot if you don't know what to do with it. To be clear, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. I think every dungeon boss having one mechanic that you need to learn or essentially die is fine. They are mechanics that are simple enough that once you learn, you pass. Otherwise, you fail. I think that's fine from an encounter design standpoint, especially since we're doing all these dungeons for a week without Mythic Plus in the first place.
Well,
so
are we not going to do delves?
No, I hope not.
I think delves get better gear, don't they?
There's a lot of stuff going on with those. I think hopefully Squishei will be the one to know first, like exactly how it works. I've heard that delves are capped at level 3 on that week. I've heard that they're not capped. I've heard that you need keys to open them and that the keys are hard, or like
okay.
I'm sure there'll be like a giant Reddit thread guide, or hopefully. No, I mean, actually, we'll give you guys all the info. Just stay tuned for a future episode. We'll tell you exactly the best way to gear in 2024 War Within. Click here.
And if that doesn't happen, find it out on Yumi TV's YouTube channel. He'll be in delves all the time.
Up delve main here.
Okay, so any final thoughts about the dungeons, about the system, about the affix discussion? Any final thoughts and stuff like that?
No, I think I'm good.
I would say that people might be a little bit dooming, and for us who play M+ all the time, it sort of is, maybe rightfully so. There's a lot of dooming going on about the expansion, about balance, about this. I think for the average person's experience, it'll probably be fine, and it could even be like pretty fun, especially if you're not really caring too much about pushing serious M+. So I don't want to scare people into thinking that like you're gonna have a miserable time pugging or anything. Like, keep in mind, everything gets better with gear, and like while the first week might be really, really tough, like if anything, that can kind of tend to be a rite of passage with WoW players, is like trying to complete stuff in pugs early on with bad gear. And if you're playing with your buds or whatever, like over time you're gonna outgear this stuff and you're gonna fix it. So I guess my final thought of like, after an hour of dooming about everything, is it's not that bad. Like we're complaining about the problems, but there's actually like, I don't know. I feel like with the boss design that is complicated, it also brings some like very, very cool and interesting bosses that I think people will really enjoy.
My final thoughts are, I think the affix system has improved dramatically. I don't think it's perfect by any means, and I think that you're going to have people still giving criticism about affixes until the end of time. I think that's just the nature of World of Warcraft players. But I do think the affix system has drastically improved. I obviously can get worse, but I think it's just as a whole better. And like Growl was saying, you're probably going to struggle. If you haven't done a lot of beta keys, you're probably going to struggle really early on. But as the season progresses, I think that it's just one of those things that you'll probably start to enjoy the season more as you learn and as you trying to get integrated with the dungeons themselves. And I'm excited for the new expansion. I think that new content, I'm always stoked to see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't push. I'm excited for it just because it's new dungeons and there's no sanguine, no bolstering, and no bursting, raging, any of those that other stuff that just needed to go. So like, to do my casual 10s, I'm sure I'll have a ton of fun with the new dungeons and learning the routes and like getting my portals and stuff like that. We
seriously needed a raid correspondent on this podcast, I think, Growl.
No, there's already other podcasts that just have 3 raider tanks as the people. Not gonna name any names, but there's enough raider POVs in this world. We need some just casual dungeon enjoyer podcast content. All right, that's what we're getting here.
All right, let's talk about some of the other stuff. I've titled this topic "News and Miscellaneous Topics." So first and foremost, let's talk about some of the pre-patch stuff. And the pre-patch stuff has been a bit of a shit show. Final bosses were bugged, where Tendril Sage Swift was stuck in the air for some groups. Talent trees, for some reason, just weren't updated as well, where Ret Paladin, Enhancement Shaman, Survival Hunter, and Windwalker Monk just didn't get updated talent trees. The servers were down, and I've never actually seen Blizzard give us a day's worth of game time before, but apparently they're giving players on NA a day's worth of game time. Was this average? I feel like this is a complete shit show with the pre-patch launching.
That was crazy, actually. There was the day that it was happening when the servers were down, someone made a joke in my comment, like, or my chat, like, oh, back in the day, Blizzard would have given us game time for this. And the servers
It's
were
true.
actually down so long that they gave us game time. Like, when is the last time, can either of you remember that Blizzard gave out game time for something?
I started in WoD. I've never been given game time. The only time that I knew that they gave game time was whenever the Warlords of Draenor garrisons were bugging people out for like 3 days on WoD launch, but I didn't start until like the second patch of WoD. So I've never gotten game time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Was
It's been a long while.
Was it that one in WoD, Squishy? Like, that's like the only
I
one
honestly
I even know
don't
of.
remember. I cannot tell you. It's been so long.
Yeah, it's been like a total mess. I would say for people who either just tend to forget every expansion, which is like everybody that plays WoW, or just someone who's new, when you see pre-patch, especially for a lot of people who are getting excited about the expansion, they see pre-patch as okay, it's their pre-patch, like time for me to play and prepare. It's not for you. This is for Blizzard. A pre-patch is for, we're going to shovel as much stuff onto the servers or into the clients for the expansion as we can so that the launch goes smoother. So this is like, yeah, it's a way bigger shit show than it's ever been, basically. But the whole point of it is so that it's a shit show right now, and then when the expansion goes live, all of these things have already broken the game and been fixed. So there just is, it's a shit show, but it's fine. Like, it's not really anything to worry about, I would say. I haven't even, like, if you're raiding on pre-patch day, you're a psycho. Like that, for anybody who's like, wow, what's the meme of the guy riding the bike and then he sticks the stick in the wheels and then falls over?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That's if you're raiding on pre-patch, like, that's you. What are you even surprised Pikachu face about that you're raiding on pre-patch day?
Found it.
You're just like surprised that, just like raiding on pre-patch day. Just like, no. That's not, pre-patch is for Blizzard. This is for like fixing the servers and getting stuff ready. And
I will say, one thing though.
Oh, what were you say? Sorry.
The one thing that I kind of have an issue with is the one thing that usually happens on pre-patch is people get to play with their new class for the most part.
That's true.
This one is weird because in Dragonflight pre-patch, everybody got their new talent trees, super shiny new things that essentially just go straight into expansion. We had specs that just didn't get their new talent trees, and like there's changes that are coming before the launch, like Growl said, but when are those changes going live now? Are they going to have to patch the game with these new talent trees like in a couple weeks before the new expansion goes live? Like, when is this happening?
Did they miss my question is like, did they miss the deadline for like pre-patch with some of these expansion trees? Because like how did this even happen?
They said it was intended. I think you will find a lot of people don't believe that.
I don't believe that, but okay, but I don't know.
My cope is it was intended in the fact that they knew that they had a deadline and they didn't finish by then, meaning they needed to ship what they had and continue to iterate past the deadline.
Yeah, see, that's what I assumed happened, but like saying it's intended doesn't. It's not intended that they have those class trees. It's intended that the pre-patch shipped with those class trees, right?
I think that is my common consensus at this point, which is fine. It's just it sucks to have a talent tree that you're excited about playing and want to get used to, like Red, and you just can't play it. You're playing on like something that isn't your previous talent tree. You're playing on a talent tree that is going to be replaced in 3 weeks, which is just weird.
Yeah, that is a very good point. That's a big one that you do want to like, not just for like fun, but also for like getting your UI ready for learning, right? Everyone's like wants to see how their class feels. And so that, like, especially if you're one of those classes where it didn't get in, you're just like, what the heck?
Yeah. So season 4 was a mess on launch. Pre-patch is like,
I'm trying to remember.
Oh, it was.
What was wrong with it? I don't even remember.
Everything. There were the wrong crests being given out.
Okay, I do remember that.
There were severe awakened bugs with like classes not scaling correctly.
The legendary weapons.
And that took days to finish. And like pre-patch was better. Like the Warband stuff, it's a major system overhaul. I can't fault them for taking extended maintenance to make sure that goes right, like to make sure their database, because it'd be way worse if things went wrong. And, characters were missing or things weren't transferred correctly.
Infinite gold hack or some bullshit, right?
Exactly. It's way better but like some of the other stuff, like the bosses bugging and stuff like that. I was doing old raid stuff and like, you can't kill Mythic Ishara right now. People say you can't kill Mythic Sylvanas. Like, she just doesn't work. and it's just a little like I want to farm my transmog, but I can't.
That's weird.
There was actually a bug when Warbands went live. Someone came in my chat like minute 1 and is like, "Hey, I found something important. Can I DM you?" Apparently, like they allow you to transfer honor across characters, but when you transfer your honor, it's Squishy. No, when you transfer honor, it counts as earning it. So you can basically just pass the honor back and forth across your character and get to like level 500 honor and unlock everything.
Oh.
That was like
Mount farmers are in shambles, I guess, over that.
Yeah. I'm just like, I should. I reported that and it got fixed, but someone came into me like minute 1 of the patch, like, "Hey, I just transferred my honor to my new guy and it did this. Like, you might want to try and fix this."
I just transferred 500 levels of worth of honor. Other pre-patch news. So Squishy and I came up with some cool stuff that we've seen. And first and foremost, if you're looking to gear characters before the new expansion, I know it's a time where people like to play or they come back to the game or stuff like that. And if this is your first podcast episode you ever watched, congratulations. But also, I'm sorry that this is the first one that you have to ever watch. But you can get 489 item level gear. It'll be pretty good for leveling. I think that otherwise you would be leveling at probably like 450, I think is the boost level. So having some 489 item level gear is pretty good. And on top of that, Squishy had something with Bullion catch up, right?
Yeah, so there's the main guy in town who offers the quest to complete a bunch of like world activities.
Oh, okay.
It was the one that you got your spark from. Right now, if you complete that, it gives you 2 Bullions if you're not like completely caught up. So it's as if you killed a raid boss, essentially.
Buy a Bellarellos. If you only have like 2 Bullions to buy anything, it's a Bellarellos as if you're a caster. That thing will help you level the best because that thing does an insane amount of damage. It's good. I'm serious.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Actually, that is a good tip. I was going to say, I wanted to add that for people, if you want to play pre-patch, fine, play it. But if you are wondering, like if you're not that familiar with WoW, you don't need to do anything. Leveling in WoW is so easy. Like even, I don't know, you're not even saving any time. I would say that's like actually kind of a cool tip because it will probably save, but even that will save you like what, 10 minutes off of your entire leveling process the first week or whatever, having a Bellarellos. So yeah, I don't know. If anything, I would say buy Transmogs. One of the cool things about that system, if you guys don't know, the Bullions, you get them like per week and you get them for this quest that he mentioned. You can buy raid items. You can actually buy Transmogs half price. So there's like a vendor in the corner. So if you don't care at all about the items, that you just like, oh, this is a cool bow and I want to play Hunter next expansion, but I don't have a Hunter. You can literally spend your Bullion to buy the Transmog for the bow from the Mythic raid, and then you just have that as if you had got it. That way you don't have to go back and farm it later. And probably good to do for like end boss weapons and stuff.
Follow-up tip though, if you buy the normal version for 2 Bullions and then upgrade it all the way, you get all 3 Transmogs for the price of 2.
Okay, all right,
dude. I didn't know we invited Dratnos onto the fucking podcast. What is
the
tip?
real Squishy tips are coming out now. Yeah, there we go. That's a real one.
That is a real Dratnos tip, I think. Okay, looking forward, we got the schedule, which Growl said that you don't really have to play pre-patch, but you know what you do have to do? You have to purchase the collector's edition for $90 US or whatever the hell it is to be able to play the game 4 days early with early access. Much to the dismay of pretty much everybody, I've heard of 0 consumers that are happy with early access. And then, of course, the expansion would launch on the 26th. Do you guys both have the collector's edition?
It's the Epic Edition, but...
Oh, the Epic Edition? Whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, I do.
I'll probably get it. I haven't decided yet. I don't have the expansion yet.
If I wasn't a streamer, I would sure as fuck not be buying this. It's so annoying that they did this.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, I don't think like the world hasn't realized yet how much people value certain things, and like game developers are just realizing how insanely OP like the early 3 days or whatever. Like the actual amount people will pay for some things is like unreal if you actually think about it. Like imagine not to give anyone hints, but imagine you woke up tomorrow and internet cost 2,000 times more than it did today.
Please no, do not do that.
if my internet was $2,000 a month, I guess I'm getting a second job or something. Like
I gotta move.
Internet.
I gotta move apartments so I can afford the internet.
It's not fair. They're abusing us. Like we have no self-control. Like there's no price elasticity for me when it comes to playing a new exciting MMO with my friends on launch. I hate to admit it, but like there's nothing to do. You get no benefit. Your character will not be stronger. You'll burn out faster. But load up on the energy drinks or whatever, and just get the early access and play with your buds.
Well, that's why I feel so predatory, is because I think just as a player, the coolest part of the game is like being able to like have that launch experience with your friends. And I think that like segmenting the audience is one of those things that I just don't think it should have happened in an MMO. It feels like, I understand early access for like other games, but I feel like for an MMO, just as a genre, it's just like so predatory, and it feels very icky to me that they're doing it.
The one devil's advocate is if it splits the player base, I think the chances of server issues is lower, which may improve that.
You're shilling so hard right
now. But I mean, it depends on the game for me. I occasionally will do it. If I'm really excited about a game, I'll get it early just because I want to support the developers if it's something that I really want. I don't have as much of an issue with this as other people do, but I understand where people are coming from when they don't like this.
I mean, I don't listen. I'm still gonna play the game. I'm not gonna vote with my wallet and stop playing. Like you got me locked down. Like Growl said, there's no price elasticity for me. I'm buying it, but like I'm just mad about it the entire time. And I think worse of them because of it. Like I thought that was one of those things that they announced at BlizzCon. I thought they were just gonna have to walk that back. I thought that people were gonna be so mad about it, and they just didn't.
So what you're saying is, next expansion, they're offering 3 days early Mythic Plus with their new Epic Edition.
Oh no! Oh no!
And you guys are all going to be chilling out.
No, man, please God. Put some tendies in this early access too, man. Why don't you?
Oh man.
What'd you guys think about? Okay, so that obviously people were annoyed about that, but then some people were pretty annoyed that people weren't going to have Mythic Plus for a month, which I don't know how some people didn't see this coming. I felt like this was known without them saying it for the longest time.
Yeah, so if people forget every 2 years, but the way expansion launches work is for the first 2 weeks, there's no anything in terms of raid or hard dungeons, basically meant so that you don't feel rushed if you want to, you can't decide your alt, you want to level a couple of guys, you want to do the story, whatever.
Professions,
you don't feel like
anything.
Yeah, exactly. You don't feel like you're behind and you're setting back your guild or your friends, which I totally support. I think it's a great thing that they do. However, normally what they did previous to Dragonflight is there's a sort of like in-between week where they soft release Mythic Plus and Heroic only raid, and they basically have like a limit to how much gear that you can get. So you could basically get like a little bit of M plus gear. I think it was like up to +6 ish in the old system, not the new system, but the old system, and then Heroic raid. And that sort of is again like kind of, I don't really know, like to me, I don't know what purpose do you guys think outside of the race to world first and that sort of thing, what purpose do you guys think the Heroic weeks like is there for?
You take this one first, Squishei.
Okay. What Heroic week is there for? My personal opinion, I think it's good for Blizzard to get the data that they need.
No, okay, that's what I was gonna say, but I wanted to make sure.
Get the tuning, because without it, I mean, it also helps them with like they get to see people on their other encounters. They get to see how people do the dungeons. Are there any oversights? It's essentially like what I would want to say live QA testing. Oh, people immune because I think like it was on Jaina on Heroic Week. People immune the Jaina debuff off, where if you got 10 stacks, you got frozen in an ice block.
With block, yeah, I forgot about that.
You ice blocked, you removed all the stacks, but on Mythic Week, they removed that because they saw guilds doing that. And so it's a little bit of live QA testing, some class tuning to get the data that they need. I think that's the biggest reason that I personally want Heroic Week.
Yeah, so
also, I guess...
Yeah, so that they have that week, right, where it's like in between. And then week 4 is Mythic Week, where they release everything, right?
Yeah.
So the difference now is they sort of did this change with Mythic Plus, right? Where what was M0 is now Heroic. What was Mythic 10 is now Mythic 0, but with no timer or affixes. So basically, M0 is a lot harder than it used to be. And to me, it made sense to only have M0 open for this in-between week because the rewards were also good, right? They gave rewards that were in between normal and heroic raid. But the part that I'm very confused about, and maybe you guys can overlap, the M0 loot is like really, really bad on that week.
So they moved the M0 loot, and I think that they uniformly moved most of the loot down one item level track that you're getting from like end of dungeon rewards or whatever. And M0 was not immune to that. So M0 went from being on this champion track to now being on a veteran track, which basically, for those who don't know, the veteran track is like the LFR track. So it's now on veteran 4 as opposed to champion 1. Champion 1 is the normal item level track. It's kind of unclear as to whether or not this was very intentional by Blizzard, like if they just shifted the entire track. They're like, yeah, M0 can drop veteran 4. That makes sense, because what they've basically done is they've invalidated all of their M0 loot, kind of like Growl was saying, where all of that loot is just completely useless.
Yeah. It kind of depends where delves end up too, because this post kind of doesn't say delves, and delves loot is somewhere in there. I don't think anybody exactly knows where the drops are. I know we know the Great Vault stuff, but not the actual drops. And if it's just better, then all of us are just going to be delve gamers for a week instead of doing dungeons.
I will say selfishly, I'm glad that Heroic Week came back, because it kind of allows you to... I didn't like the thing in the past where you would do 60 dungeons the first week of the patch launching, where you were basically stuck in like M+ prison, where you would do your raid that you would do for that week, and then if you wanted to maximize your... And this is just like the most sweaty shit ever. Like, this is maybe the least relatable thing that I've said in this podcast. But then you would do your raids for the week, and then you, in between your Thursday and your Sunday raid, you would do 60 dungeons over the weekend to try to gear your character up as much as possible, because Mythic was already unlocked. And like, because you'd already done all of your heroics that you were going to do for the week. And so it was one of those situations that I'm actually glad that they're bringing back the heroic week, because it slows down the cadence of gearing, and it gives you like 2 weeks of heroic loot before you then have to only go to do 40 dungeons or whatever.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like the sweaty nerd aspect of it.
It is 1%.
Well, I think actually
peak.
It extends a little bit more beyond that. I think it's just awkward in general for everybody, right? Because it's a weird situation where, okay, it's Tuesday, it's patch day, the raid is out, your guild is on. What do you want to do? You want to go set foot in the raid, but like, well, why wouldn't you gear up, right? Like, if you're going to spend 6 hours of the week in the raid, why wouldn't you gear up and do a bunch of dungeons before you go into the raid? And it creates this weird situation where like the raid comes out, and then everyone's incentive to go run away from the raid and do something else, and then now come back to the raid later. I do agree that like people are sweaty and they take it way too far in some regards, but I do think that in general, heroic is probably better for most people. Like, I definitely get it that there's a lot of people who just don't care and who probably just want the content to come out.
Exactly.
But I do think there's tons of people here and there that have various reasons why having that in-between week. And then on top of like the tuning Blizzard aspect, I think is a very, very important part. You know, it makes it so Mythic doesn't come out and then things are crazy. Because again, when it comes to like, you know, people FOMOing or worrying about stuff, like that can be a situation that like, you know, oh no, like Rogue is insanely broken and you can kill these bosses on Mythic if you have a Rogue, and then it's like you're not a Rogue and now you're benched for the first week of Mythic, or like people are pugging and no one will invite you because you're not this, and it's like it creates this really, really weird scenarios where it's probably better off that it doesn't exist. I just wish that, I guess we'll see, because in theory M0 gear is still pretty good, right? Like, I guess I don't know how the delves work, but like
it's pretty bad.
Bro, people spent 12 hours a day farming Maruk Centaur just to get reputation, to get one drop of an item level on one.
Dude,
of
why
their
am I being subtweeted right now?
I'm Max Maruk Centaur. I'm Max Maruk Centaur too. Like, I think that, you know, 13 item levels is a lot. Like, I think maybe it'll be fine still. It just feels a little, I don't know. Actually, the more that I think about it, 13 item levels is a lot. Like, how much we were doing for how little gain on the first couple weeks of Dragonflight, and it was still really, really fun. I think if it ends up being the best thing, this is what I'm worried about, okay? I'm worried about that the best possible loot is going to be from delves, And I'm worried that the delve keys are going to be very, very gate kept. And it's going to be like, you have to do this insane 6-hour grind to get one delve key to open up one chest. And so the best thing to do is to like, whatever, you and Bran in a in a 12-pack of Pepsi, and you're just sitting there every night, just 18 hours with Bran, and then you're like, all right, nice, I can do one delve now. Like, that's what I'm sort of worried about it happening. I think I don't really mind. So, like, actually thinking about it, like, I don't know. I think if you are actually doing M0s for people that don't know, are going to be challenging on week 1. Mark my words. If people are worried about, oh no, M0s will be nothing, like, dude, people are going to be dying on M0s. You're going to be the average people, if you're pugging, are going to get, unless you're super try hard and you're like in a guild that's doing heroic raid like on Tuesday and stuff, you're going to get slaughtered by those M0s, I think. So I think the gearing, as long as there isn't really super degenerate, I'm okay with delves giving okay gear too, or good gear or comparable, but I'm just worried about super degenerate weird stuff that I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to happen.
I will say, as somebody who's taken a brief raid hiatus, I'm not in love with the fact that M+ dungeons aren't open immediately. Although I do think that there's maybe a bit more of a larger issue at play here, where M+ loot being unlimited amounts of end of dungeon rewards, like that it feels like it breaks the system as a whole. Like how the raid system and the M+ system really struggle to coexist gearing wise. The end of dungeon rewards is like pretty tough with that.
I think there's a world where they open Mythic Plus dungeons, but just keep like it provides no loot or anything like that. But I feel like that's very slim.
I mean, why would you, dude? You're not gonna be. You're not even doing a +2. Wait, like, you're gonna get your ass eaten by these mobs.
I mean, if you just want to have fun, like, you used to be able to do that in the system, right? Like, you used to be able to go above a +6 for fun or to get your vault for the next week, but it wasn't the optimal for doing, that kind of stuff. But
I
understand it.
I see what you're saying. Like, previously on that week, you could just do high M+ for no reason. Not that many people did it, but it was there if you wanted to do it. That is, is an idea. I feel like they won't do it because of M0s, but I think it would be fine.
I mean, we all got Realm First 15s in those weeks, right? Did you get Realm First 15 in Shadowlands, Growl?
I've had some incidents. Well, so in Shadowlands, I was on some weird server, so I did get Realm First 15.
Okay.
Dragonflight.
There weren't Realm First achievements in Dragonflight.
Oh yeah. I don't remember. We were trying to get actually World First 15. I remember because I bought Sephuz on my Shaman as my first legendary, because I just thought it would be optimal for the week 1. So I literally bought a week 1 M+ legendary on my Shaman.
In Shadowlands?
In Shadowlands, yeah.
You are a menace for that.
And everyone in my chat was losing their mind, by the way.
It was such a bad buy. It was such a bad legendary.
Well, the thing is, it wasn't my raid guy, so I was just kind of like winging it anyway. I just thought it was good. But yeah, we didn't end up getting World First 15, but I think we did get Realm First.
Okay.
I also think that like that sort of stuff would be cool too. Like maybe they encourage people or like give some achievements or some, I don't know, some shout outs or whatever. Like that's a cool thing people can do on that week as well.
Yeah.
Squishy, what do you think about the myth track shit that's been going down?
My personal opinion is it's not going to matter until 3 months into the season right now. Nothing will realistically change, I feel like, for the majority of the season, because your aspect crests theoretically are going to remain the same cap. They haven't said, but I assume it will. You will just need more to increase your gear cap later. And I'm not the player to push Mythic Plus, so I don't necessarily care about hitting that gear cap. I will just get it naturally by doing, raid farm. And that's fine by me. It'll make raid farm easier. I'm all for making raid farm easier. I am kind of just fine with it. But I know that, like, I'm not the target audience of why people are mad right now.
I mean, I think it's understandable. Like, I think that from like a raider only perspective, you guys didn't re-clear. Like, dude, I didn't re-clear it all during Vault. I didn't re-clear it all during Abyss, and that obviously I didn't raid in Amirdrassil. Did either of you re-clear Amirdrassil at all?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, actually, my guild, we actually cleared Amirdrassil, then our entire guild quit, and then we got a new roster, and then so I actually progged
I'm talking about
Amirdrassil
prog
twice.
re-clear.
Yeah, oh yeah, we progged the entire raid.
You
twice.
hold on.
Our second Tindril kill and our second Fire Rat kill. I mean, it was only like 100 pulls.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know this lore. Actually, this is insane.
I mean, that's our problem, not really a WoW problem.
That is an insane issue. Okay, most guilds didn't re-clear. Most mythic cutting edge level guilds did not re-clear.
Yeah,
rather. Sorry.
They waited for nerfs because it was so difficult to complete again because it didn't get any easier from week to week because you're already capped. And
I'm not talking farm. I'm talking about when was did you extend your lockout until Fire Rack died after Smolderon?
No. We did both times we extended.
I think most guilds just extended perma until the end of the nobody did re-clear at all.
Once you got Smolderon, once you were on Tindril, you didn't re-clear.
Yeah.
Well, because gearing was so fast that everyone was basically max gear by the time you got to Tindril.
And so that's what I think that this is trying to address, right? Like it just is trying to be as unbiased as possible. I think that this is what this is trying to address, where they're giving you 6 out of 6 and they're increasing the value of myth track gear. I think it's really shitty, but I think that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, so if people aren't totally in the loop, basically what Tettles is saying is now myth goes to 6. So there's 2 changes. One is that myth goes to 6 of 6 instead of 4 of 4.
Yes.
So every single piece that you get from Mythic, including your weekly vault from M Plus and first boss loot, can be upgraded all the way to 6 of 6 as opposed to 4 of 4. Whereas before only very rare items could get upgraded to 6 of 6. So that's one change. The other change is that in the Great Vault for Mythic Plus loot, it's only Mythic 1 gear.
From 10s. From 10s.
Yeah, from 10s, and then anything lower is not even Myth Track, which means normally you would get something out of your vault, right? And I think it would take either 3 or 2 upgrades to get it to max level, and now it always takes 5 upgrades to get it to max level.
So many crests. By the way, this is so many crests that you have to kill. Look, now did the math on it, and if you're just an M plus only player and you get all of your myth loot, it takes you 98 timed runs to get enough crests. That is an insane amount.
So I personally like gearing up my guy, and I think gearing up is fun. And for me, I'm not that competitive on my alts where I want my alt to be max geared, and then I'm I hear some people for instance now is just so good at the game that he doesn't even start playing until his guy is max level in title range keys. That character doesn't even exist to him until he's in title range keys. But for 99.9% of players, I think gearing up alts is the fun part. So I think if people are a little bit overreacting, if you're a major altaholic, I can see this being a little bit frustrating. But in general, I like the idea of gearing characters, and I don't really I think they've been experimenting with getting max gear faster and faster and faster and faster since the beginning of Shadowlands. Yeah. And I think it's gotten to the point in Dragonflight where it's we were full bit with Bullions. We were full bis week 3.
The right? Bullion season 4 thing. I think that everybody would pretty universally agree that was too fast of gearing for a normal season.
Right. So I think they're just kind of moving it around and seeing exactly where it should be. And I do feel with I don't know. I hate being that guy that says, "Oh, gearing longer is great," because everyone's just gonna write mean shit in the comments. But I don't know. I think gearing a guy is fun. I think the funnest parts of the season for me are doing keys with my buds, especially when I don't care that, what class they play. I don't care they're a feral druid. I don't care they're 500 IO, because we're just doing farm keys and we're gearing up. And it's to me, that's the fun part. When you get to the point where you're max level gear and your tank won't even log on unless I can find an Aug Evoker for him, that's the not fun part of dungeons, but so I don't know. I think I don't necessarily mind that they're elongating the gearing process, but I do sympathize for people who want to be competitive on their alts, or maybe you don't like your first character and you're oh my god, already this giant hole of crest that I need to farm is overwhelming.
I will say that my biggest issue with this is now hero track gear is much worse if you're playing a character that's max hero track level gear compared to a character or a character that's like a mix of hero track level gear and myth versus a character that's like full myth, right? You're going to be like noticeably worse than that. So whenever you have that hero track gear, it's going to be 13 item levels behind somebody who's got like full myth in that slot. And I think that, to me, that's the part that's like the most concerning, because there's a lot of times where M+ only players will wear, heroic trinkets or something like that, where those are the only trinkets that you're able to get, and you're playing 2 of them, and so you're wearing those 13 item levels down compared to somebody else. And basically, you're just beholden to the vault giving you good RNG. Like, what happens if you're only doing M+ and like the vault doesn't give you a piece that you can use that's on myth track? That, to me, also feels really bad. I think that this also is a situation where, say I wanted to start a character on week 9 or something like that, it's going to take me a really long time to get it up to the same level as my main, and there's instances where I might not even be able to get it up to the same level as my main, especially if I'm only getting 1 piece of myth track level gear out of 10s. Like, personally, I'm not rating this tier, but now I'm basically going to be doing like a friend alt mythic run. Yeah, basically a pug mythic run, which Mythic is opening immediately on release. It's cross realm from start of expansion. So if you're capable of doing that, it's fine. Like, for me, I'm not, don't shed a tear for me. I'm going to be okay gear wise, but it does suck, like, for the players who don't want to raid like at all. Like, if raiding at all is like, I'm unwilling to do it, you're going to be noticeably worse off gear wise, which I think I do understand. Again, I think that people permanently extending their lockouts in Mythic Raid was a problem that they needed to resolve. I just don't love that this was their resolution.
Okay. What if hot take to solve some of the crest issue? The
crest issue, I think, is different, but yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, the way I see it, I almost think they could extend the Great Vault loot past 10 to 12, which is when the other affix kicks in, and that gives you, myth 3 out of 6 or something like that.
That could be good.
I would also not be opposed to, if you time it on the highest difficulty, so just a 10 timed is just a higher myth track. Because it is, especially with all the additional fixes and stuff like that, with the extra timer, you time it, you get myth 3 out of 6 instead of myth 1 out of 6.
I've been an advocate since the beginning of this system that every single week that goes by, you should get progressively more crests for each boss killed that is dropping crests to that difficulty, and each timed M+ run. I don't think that there should be some situation where, I think that, week 10, you should be dropping 22 crests instead of 12 crests, 1 for each week that's passed. And I think that would help your catch up a lot. And I think that would smooth out the alt catch up experience, because I don't think it's an issue. I don't think many people complain about doing it on their main. It's literally just like, oh, if I wanted to start a second character later on, it's like pretty obnoxious.
Yeah, with regards to Squishei's idea about increasing, like, basically saying, okay, well, if you think this is too easy for M+, like, make it harder and still let us get that same level of rewards but add the challenge. To me, I guess the vibe that I get is they want people to feel inclined to raid. They want people to be in Tettles' position where I was an M+ player, but I have to find a group of friends and put together a guild, right? Yeah. They like not to like, I know it sounds weird, but like they literally, that's their goal. I think is they want Tettles to feel like, oh God, I need to get with my friends and make a guild. So I think like, trying to give back more to people who don't do that, that's their whole point of making the rewards worse, I think, is they're like, this is too good for a pug player. Part of the magic of World of Warcraft and Azeroth is everyone unites against the dragons, and we need them to form a mythic guild or whatever. I think, to me, the biggest change they need to do is make mythic pugging more accessible. Remove the lockouts, remove all that stuff. Just let people do whatever, like pug bosses. Like, I think, to me, like, if you want to push us towards those rewards, then make things easier to do that. Make it so, like, I think a lot of the reason that people don't raid is not because they don't like raiding, it's because they don't like literally having a second job where they have to show up at 6 o'clock, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday.
Dude,
and it's just like yeah.
Farm is what killed me. Farm killed my desire for it, because it was just like I had to show up 3 days a week for farm, and I'm just like, dude, I'd literally just rather lay in my bed right now than do farm. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah.
Or like I was like heavily pushing keys in season 1 too, and it was just like every single day I'm doing raid farm, and I'm just like, dude, I'd rather just be doing keys right now. Why? You're killing my vibe.
Cool. Wiping on Rasagath for the
That's what I'm saying. Like wiping on Razgeth in my second split, and again, this is like so niche because I was rating at like a World 30 level, so like we were doing weird shit. But like, come on.
Bosses just got so hard. Like I don't know if that's. It just seems like so many of the bosses don't get nerfed with gear. You know, like bosses like I mean, I guess eventually they do. Like you really start to pummel them, but like. Dude, Fireact, Tindral, like Razageth, like we're wiping on those bosses. I feel like the obvious one it was Awakened when it's like, okay, Razageth sucks, I hate this raid. And then, oh, it's Aberrus, this raid's great, we're done with this in an hour and a half. Yeah. And then, oh no, it's Amirdrassil, we're wiping to Tindral and Fireact. Oh no, we're wiping to Razageth. Oh, right, it's Aberrus again, we get to be done early. And it's like, not having a boss that just owns you regardless, like just because it's a really tough mechanic check is like, I don't know, but every Mythic raid has to have those bosses, I guess.
We had 0 deep farm situations this expansion, which felt very jarring, and I think that this is part of what they're trying to do with the Myth 6 out of 6 is they're trying to increase the scaling over time and make it to where it's like a long-term gearing process. And in addition to that, they also announced that thing where they're it's like what was it called? It wasn't called Laser Matrix, it was the other one. Archon of the Titans.
Yeah.
Archive
of the Titans.
They're doing the Archon of the Titans thing for the raids in the future where you complete a quest every single week and it will progressively give you more and more stats. That was announced in an interview. We haven't really seen.
It's 3% damage and healing per week or something like that.
I mean, that's a lot.
It is.
Oh, they're doing that too? Oh, I forgot about it.
It's both. Yeah, they announced it in an interview. I think Morgan Day was talking about it.
Yeah, it caps at 8 stacks, so 24% damage and healing, which is a pretty significant amount.
Yeah.
Unsure if it's every week, but it's gonna be a lot of bonus, and I think it'll benefit a lot of people.
So hopefully we end up in that deep farm situation that you guys were talking about that you just like really didn't have, where you're speed killing bosses and stuff like that. I haven't seen people speed kill bosses since Corruption season of BFA, last season of BFA.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Since Augavoker released, and you had 14 Augavokers and 1 DK in a raid.
Okay, well that was whatever. All right. Anyways, those are basically all the topics we had today. Growl, did you find any Q&A? Are we done?
I don't know. We can just drag on the show and do more dumb stuff. Hold on, let me see. I asked in my Discord. We don't have questions. This is the first episode. We just revealed it. And I asked my people randomly in my Discord if they have any random serious or meme questions.
Okay. And
someone had a terrible meme question that is just the same meme that gets repeated in my Discord every day. The next one is, did Tettles name the podcast The Bench as a Hail Mary to try and get Moonkin buffed going into the expansion?
No, I actually did come up with the podcast name. So basically, I actually kind of wanted to keep it consistent branding with like what Growl's stream already had. I thought it felt like it was going to be tangentially related. I also thought it was like a decent name for a World of Warcraft podcast, just generally, and everybody kind of agreed that it was like fine.
Yeah, I thought it was sick. Okay, the next one. Who would win in a WWE match, our team or the Potty C team?
Drados has been hitting the gym lately. Hold on.
Yeah, Drados is actually kind of cool. shout out to Draddy. I'm a little worried about Draddy. I mean, I could take Dorki down, no problem. I'm not worried about that. Maybe one of you guys. Max plays hockey too, though. I don't know. All right, maybe we need to hit the gym.
Well, Squishy's Canadian. That guy knows skates.
Oh shit.
I don't know. I think it would be an interesting triple threat tag team, though.
Okay, they asked when we'll get Meg's dad on the podcast to discuss delves with me. That was a great arc. Meg's dad is the head of the Delve Foundation, and apparently I'm his mortal enemy now.
Jeez.
Oh no.
We are gonna try to, I guess, just podcast related. We are gonna try to get guests on. Obviously not every single week, but we're gonna try to get guests on whenever the time feels right. They have some topics to discuss or whatever. So we're definitely open to guests. Also, I didn't announce this at the beginning of the show, but the show notes every single week will also be in the description. So if there was something from the episode that you want to go look at, whether it be a link or a week or whatever, definitely go check the description. So.
Oh, okay. Next one is, instead of tip of the week, Growl should do Growl's death tip of the week. So there's a running joke in my stream that the only tech I know revolves around being dead, because I'm always dead, so I know all the in and outs of dying and keys. So in today's Growl death tip of the week, on the beta right now, for some reason, you can actually get a feast food buff during combat. So if you're like me and you die during bosses a lot, you can pre-drop a feast before you pull the boss, die to a swirly, then get rezzed, and then walk over to the feast and get the food buff in the middle of the boss fight. So that is my death tip of the week.
Kind of related. It's insane how people watch the game from like a streamer's POV solely and then start to gaslight themselves that you're like a bad player because you die a lot purely because they're only watching it from your POV.
Like yes, that is it. I don't die a lot. It's just what they think.
I mean, as somebody who's played with you, I don't think you die any more than anybody else. I think you die like an average amount. Like I don't think it's like it's not like an insane amount.
That I die an average amount. I feel like there's going to be a joke in there somewhere about us.
how many pictures of you in angel form do you have?
There was a website, but I got taken down. I DMCA'd it. All right, last question. Are the bugs that Tettles brings up on the podcast going to get instantly fixed, or is that only for his channel?
Listen, I'm a man of the people. I will not hold back anything. That's fine.
That was a great era where just 7 videos in a row, you would just post something and it would just get immediately fixed the next day.
It was fine. I mean, as far as uploading videos, right? Like, I think that M Plus is very tech heavy sometimes, and like I think it's one of those things that if you don't know the tech that some of the other people are doing, it's like really hard to learn it. So I was just uploading videos of cool tech that I found, and I was just like, I don't know. If they fix it, they fix it. That is what it is.
Oh.
Well, that's Squishei?
You guys submit questions.
What did you say?
What were you gonna say? You were saying something.
Oh, I was just there was one question that I saw. Do you think the first bosses of Mythic will be harder with Heroic Week returning?
You think you'll tuning wise?
Yeah, tuning wise.
Oh, so the question is basically asking: will Blizzard tune the first few bosses of Mythic harder due to the fact that Heroic Week is returning?
I assume that Heroic Week means people will be higher eye level rather than coming in off of scraps.
I know that some people don't like or argue that it's not true, but I do genuinely think they've been tuning around the Race to World First recently, so I don't think that they'll be any harder. Because I think that they've been tuning the raid as if you're going to have like 4 set and like a bunch of other shit week 1 anyways.
Yeah, the tuning around the Race to World First and gearing is actually kind of weird. I was thinking about that when you were talking about the aspect crest and stuff. Is like, I feel like the difference between a Race to World First player and an average like cutting edge player is like they're doing literally like 30% more damage and healing, or like even more. So it's got to be so hard to tune when the Race to World First people can get the same level of gear like that on week 2. So I also feel like that's maybe something else that they're doing to help the civilian guilds, is like allowing you to eventually outgear the content much easier for which is good, I think, because it sort of like lets people get their foot in the door. And to go back to like the first boss question, I kind of feel like, so 2 things. Number 1, I think the first boss is usually easy because they want people to kill it, and I also think the first raid of the expansion is usually easy because they want people in there. They're seeing people who maybe have never played WoW or haven't played in a long time, and they really take a lot more care into the first couple bosses into like not having ridiculous mechanics. Whereas like by the end of the expansion, you get like Sepulcher and Amirdrassil and stuff with like all this crazy shit on the second boss or whatever. So I expect the early Mythic will still be fine. I wouldn't expect too many road bumps, but I hope that any changes that they're doing in terms of the myth track, in terms of the Heroic Week, I hope that all those changes are aimed towards making the average progression experience better for us. Like, I think they want to, like, it's sort of like the keys being affix disabled in 12s. They're not catering to the high level people. They're actually
just us.
Like, they're basically making it tolerable for them while being able to cater for the average person. So I hope it makes the experience better, not worse.
Yeah. I don't think they'll tune. I think it'll be the same. They want their first bosses to be generally easy at this point, I think. And this one looks relatively easy as well. So I don't know how you tune this one up without being overly difficult.
I did raid testing, but I didn't do all the raid testing. Squishei, as somebody who's a prolific raid tester and stream watcher, does the raid look good?
I'm not excited for it on Mythic. No.
Oh no! All right,
we'll talk about that in the future. But,
all right, next week we'll talk about why the raid sucks. Apparently,
there are some cool things there, but yeah.
Any final words? Any final thoughts?
Shout out to everybody that made it this far in the podcast. If you made it this far in the podcast, comment something about delves. And so the comments will just be full of delves, but we'll all know why you're actually writing that. It's the secret message to let you know that you made it this far. But shout out to you guys.
All right, cool. And shout out to all the delve Dannies in the chat. Goodbye.